I got my license just a few years before I bought Basanti, and yeah, my father used to ride when he was younger. My brother is a rider.
In 2018, Noraly was a stable Dutch geologist until a devastating affair wrecked her world. It's the kind of tragedy that you don't just cry over. She sold everything and bought a one-way ticket to India. That pain fueled her 190,000 kilometers across 80 countries, turning a broken heart into a 2.8 million subscription empire. But her book, Free Ride, reveals the road wasn't just an escape, but a brutal reckoning. What betrayal would make you sell it all and just ride? Well, for Noraly, Basanti got her to Europe, but her next bike swap hid even bigger storms. Betrayal that broke a geologist. Imagine having your life perfectly mapped out. You're 31, you've got a master's degree in biogeology from Utrecht, and you're pulling six figures as a project superintendent for Van Oord. We're talking massive engineering projects in the Bahamas, Kuwait, and Brazil. Noraly wasn't just some kid looking for herself. She was a high performer who had already spent years in the trenches of the mining and dredging world. She'd worked the goldfields in Australia and managed dredging operations in Kazakhstan and Uruguay. By all traditional metrics, she had won the game. But then, in early 2018, the ground didn't just shake. It opened up and swallowed everything she thought she knew about her future. The betrayal wasn't professional. It was deeply personal. Discovering a long-term partner's affair is a specific kind of trauma that makes your own home feel like a crime scene. For most people, that's a year of therapy and maybe a sad breakup playlist. But for Noraly, she decided to torch the whole map. In July 2018, she did the unthinkable. She quit that prestigious career, sold her house, and offloaded almost every possession she owned. There's something visceral about that level of commitment. It's not just taking a break, it's a total system reset. And get this, she didn't even start as a biker. She flew to India with a backpack, just looking for air, but the grit was always there. Even as a teenager, she wasn't exactly typical. She used to go on solo 20-kilometer roller skating treks through the Dutch grasslands. Think about that for a second. While other kids were hanging out at malls, she was already testing her endurance against the horizon. She'd also done the broke backpacker thing in her early 20s, couch surfing across the world before the mining money started hitting her bank account. So when her life imploded in 2018, that old muscle memory for adventure kicked in, but this time it had a darker, more urgent edge. She ended up in Manali, high in the Himalayas, and decided to rent a Royal Enfield Himalayan for 3 weeks. Now, here's where it gets interesting. She wasn't an expert rider. She was just a woman with a lot of noise in her head and a heavy throttle in her hand. Those 3 weeks changed everything. The focus required to keep a bike upright on those brutal mountain passes was the only thing loud enough to drown out the pain of the affair. She realized that mechanical problems were solvable, unlike the messy, unsolvable end of a 10-year relationship. She was hooked. Instead of going home, she went to Delhi and bought her own bike, the legendary Basanti. And this is the part that still blows my mind. She didn't just tool around India for a bit. She decided to ride that bike all the way back to the Netherlands. We're talking 36,000 kilometers across 25 countries. She went through Myanmar, Thailand, and Malaysia, then shipped the bike to Oman and rode through Iran, Tajikistan, Russia, and the Balkans. Initially, she tried to be a blogger. She launched the Itchy Boots site to write about her travels. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The blog kind of flopped. People didn't want to read polished travelogues. They wanted to see the dust. They wanted to hear the engine struggle. On November the 21st, 2018, she posted her first YouTube video, and the trajectory of her life changed forever. She wasn't a content creator then. She was just a geologist on a bike, filming her escape from a ghost. Ever had a betrayal push you to an extreme like that? Seriously, what's the one thing someone could do to you that would make you sell your house and just ride? As she crossed those 80 borders over the next few years, the numbers started getting crazy. 2.8 million subscribers followed her, but if you look closely at those early Season 1 videos, you can see the free ride philosophy taking shape. She was filling an emotional void with every kilometer. In her 2025 bestseller, she finally admitted that the road wasn't just about seeing the world. It was about outrunning the version of herself that got cheated on. Every time Basanti broke down in the middle of a Tajik mountain pass, it was a distraction she welcomed. Fixing a carburetor is easy. Fixing a heart is work. She eventually made it back to the Netherlands, pulling into her hometown after 8 months on the road. Most people would have called that a successful gap year and gone back to geology. But Noraly had tasted a version of freedom that made a corporate office feel like a prison cell. She had turned 190,000 kilometers of dirt into a brand, but more importantly, into a shield. Basanti had served her well, getting her across continents and through the first stage of her grief. But as she stood back on Dutch soil, she knew the healing wasn't done. The road was calling again, and while Basanti got her to Europe, her next bike swap hid even bigger storms brewing. Bike swaps and hidden scars. Here's the thing about first loves. They're almost never the ones you stay with. Basanti, that Royal Enfield Himalayan that carried Noraly from India back to the Netherlands, was the bike that saved her soul. But by the time she reached Europe, she knew she'd outgrown it. For the next leg of the journey, the massive trek from Patagonia to Alaska, she needed something with more teeth. So she made a move that shocked a lot of her early fans. She traded the simple, low-tech Basanti for a Dutch-plated KTM 690 Enduro R. She named her Dano. If Basanti was a steady pony, Dano was a thoroughbred, faster, taller, and way more aggressive. But here's where it gets interesting. Shipping a bike to the tip of South America is a logistical nightmare and a massive financial gamble. It was a statement of intent. Noraly wasn't just a backpacker on a bike anymore. She was becoming a professional explorer. She started Season 2 in Ushuaia, the literal end of the world, and for a while it was pure magic. The KTM handled the gravel of the Ruta 40 like a dream. But then the world stopped. Picture this. You're riding through the remote mountains of Peru, finally finding your rhythm after the heartbreak of 2018, and suddenly the borders slam shut. COVID-19 didn't just pause her trip. It stranded her in Peru for 8 agonizing months. Now, for most of us, a lockdown was about Netflix and sourdough bread. For Noraly, it was a psychological test. She was stuck in a foreign country, alone, with a high-performance machine she couldn't ride and a brand, Itchy Boots, that relied entirely on movement. In her book, Free Ride, she touches on the hidden scars of this period. It wasn't just the boredom. It was the return of the loneliness she'd been trying to outrun. When you're forced to sit still, the ghosts you left behind in the Netherlands finally catch up to you. When she finally got out of Peru, something shifted. The KTM was great, but it was temperamental. And for a solo woman riding through the most remote parts of the planet, temperamental is a dangerous trait. This led to what I call the Honda pivot. She moved toward reliability. First, there was Ronin, the Honda CB 500X she used to explore the Nordics when the rest of the world was still closed. But the real game changer was Savannah, the Honda CRF 250L she bought in South Africa. Now, let's talk about Savannah, because this bike story is a literal heartbreak. Noraly decided to push herself and the bike to the absolute limit by entering the Kalahari Rally in 2021. This wasn't just traveling anymore, this was competitive racing against professional rally riders. And get this, midway through the brutal desert grind, the subframe of that Honda literally snapped. Think about the forces required to snap a steel frame. It was a mechanical betrayal that mirrored her own physical exhaustion. She didn't just fix it and move on, she ended up donating Savannah to a museum in South Africa. It was the end of an era, an end that proved that even the most bulletproof bikes have a breaking point if you push them hard enough. Which Itchy Boots bike swap shocked you most? Was it leaving the KTM beast behind? Or were you like me, watching that Kalahari rally with your jaw on the floor when the subframe gave way? After the rally heartbreak, she leveled up again with Alaska, the Honda CRF 300L Rally. This bike became her workhorse through West and East Africa. But as the channel grew to over 2.8 million subscribers and the Itchy Boots brand became a global phenomenon, the physical toll started to mount. In 2023, during the Dinaric rally in Croatia, she had a massive crash that resulted in a serious injury. For the first time, the unbreakable Noraly looked human. She had to go home to recover, and the silence on the channel was deafening. During these breaks, the rumors always swirl. People wonder about road romances, or if she's lonely. It's the curse of the solo traveler. Everyone wants her to find a partner, but they don't realize that the road is the partner. In her book, she's incredibly raw about the reality of being a solo woman in places like Iran or Tajikistan. She talks about the catcalls, the constant "where is your husband?" questions, and the occasional terrifying moments where she was pushed off her line by aggressive drivers. These aren't just travel stories, they're the price she pays for her independence. She's honest about the fact that while the world usually embraces her back, there are days when the weight of being itchy boots is heavier than the bike itself. And yet, she keeps going. She transitioned from the broken geologist of 2018 to a woman who can strip an engine in the mud and navigate a rally roadbook at 100 kilometers per hour. By the time she hit season 4, she had achieved a breakthrough status in North America, with her high production value episodes bringing in a massive audience. She was no longer just outrunning a breakup, she was building a legacy. She'd survived the mechanical betrayals of the KTM, the structural failure of the Honda in the desert, and the literal breaking of her own body in Croatia. But here's the thing about the road. It always has one more test. You can have the best bike, the best gear, and millions of people cheering you on, but nature doesn't care about your subscriber count. As she prepared to head back into the heart of Africa, she was riding high on her triumphs. She felt prepared. She had the CRF 300L rally dialed in. She had the experience. But she was about to learn that all the preparation in the world can't save you when the terrain decides to strike back. Triumphs were mounting, but one specific African dirt road was waiting to deliver the ultimate payback, the crash that nearly ended it all, May 2023, Tanzania. Noraly is deep into the African leg of her journey, riding Alaska, that Honda CRF 300L rally that had become like an extension of her own body. She'd already put 43,000 kilometers on the clock through some of the most unforgiving terrain on the planet. But on a remote, dusty track, the road finally collected its debt. In a split second, a routine stretch of dirt turned into a nightmare. Here's the thing about motorcycle crashes. It's rarely the fall that gets you. It's what you hit on the way down. Noraly went down hard, and while she's usually the first to jump up and check the bike, this time she couldn't move. The initial report was a broken collarbone, which is a standard occupational hazard for off-road riders. But wait, it gets weirder and much scarier. It wasn't just a clean break. A sharp shard of her own bone had actually punctured her lung. Think about that for a second. She was miles from civilization, struggling to breathe, with a piece of her own skeleton threatening her life. This wasn't just a mechanical betrayal like the subframe snap in the Kalahari. This was her own body failing her. The Africa series, which had been building into her most epic season yet, came to a screeching, violent halt. She had to be medevaced back to the Netherlands for emergency surgery and a long, grueling rehab process. Now, this is where most people would have called it quits. She'd already seen 80 countries and ridden 190,000 kilometers. She had the money, the fame, and every reason to stay home where the air doesn't require a chest tube. But for Noraly, sitting still has always been the most dangerous thing she can do. During that forced silence in 2024, she didn't just do physical therapy. She went back to the very beginning. She started writing. In June 2025, she released her book, Free Ride. It became a New York Times bestseller almost immediately, and for good reason. It finally addressed the rumors that had been swirling since she left that geology job in 2018. You see, for years, fans had speculated about hidden heartbreaks or secret road romances. There was even that weird rumor about her being stranded in South America for reasons other than the pandemic. But the book set the record straight. It revealed a woman who had spent years using the road as a form of surgery for her soul. She wrote about being pushed miles from civilization and finding an unshakable self that didn't need a partner or a corporate title to be valid. The crash in Tanzania wasn't just a physical break, it was the final shedding of the old Noraly. By the time she fully recovered and launched Season 8 in late 2025, she had traded the lightweight Hondas for a beast, the Yamaha Tenere 700. She headed to Pakistan, tackling some of the highest paved and unpaved roads in the world. And get this, she wasn't just a vlogger anymore. By the start of 2026, she had built a literal empire. We're talking over 3 million subscribers and a staggering 658 million views. But look closer at the business model. She launched masterclasses on solo travel, a massive merchandise line, and an ambassador program that turned her Itchy Boots brand into a global movement. She's the technical co-founder of her own life now, managing high-margin digital products while dodging boulders in the Karakoram Mountains. Do you think Noraly's still hiding more heartbreak tales in those mountain passes, or has she finally outrun the ghosts of 2018? What rumors have you heard in the comments that you think she's still keeping under her helmet? Now, here's where it gets interesting for the future. As she rides through Pakistan in early 2026, the Itchy Boots brand is more than just a travel show. It's a case study in authenticity. She's shown the world that you can take the most brutal betrayals, an affair that destroys your home, a pandemic that traps you in Peru, and a bone shard that punctures your lung, and turn them into a multi-million-dollar legacy. But survival has a cost. If you watch her most recent videos, you can see the change. There's a precision in her riding and a deliberate nature to her storytelling that wasn't there in the early Basanti days. She's not just itchy anymore, she's intentional. The uncomfortable truth is that no amount of armor, no matter how expensive, can stop an internal break. Whether it's a heart or a lung, the healing happens in the silence between the miles. Noraly Schoenmaker proved that geology might have taught her how the earth is formed, but the road taught her how a human is rebuilt. She went from managing dredging projects for Van Ord to managing the dreams of millions of solo adventurers. From the wreckage of that Tanzanian dirt road to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, the story of Itchy Boots isn't actually about motorcycles. It's about the fact that sometimes you have to break everything you own, and a few things you are, to find out what's actually unbreakable. She's still out there, 190,000 kilometers later, proving that the real free ride only happens when you stop running from the pain and start riding through it. But even with 2.8 million people watching every move, the cost of that survival lingers in every solo campsite and every border crossing. She's built an empire, but she's still a geologist at heart, always looking for what lies beneath the surface. And as she navigates the peaks of Pakistan, one thing is certain: the road isn't done with her yet, and she sure as hell isn't done with the road. From a shattered geologist to a legend with 658 million views, Noraly proved betrayal builds unbreakable riders. We've seen the affair, the bone shards, and 190,000 kilometers of grit. What pushed her farthest? Love lost or road rage? Drop your theory in the comments below, and always remember, the real ride starts after the fall.